move slowly, not in a straight line, as though they were picking their way. Nothing could have looked less like an assault. Some of the Germans had containers strapped to their backs. They seemed like laborers going to spray the vines.
Flamethrowers. The Germans were trying out their new weapon on the French. The tongues of burning oil, propelled by compressed nitrogen, turned men into flaming torches. On the second day came the assault troops to exploit the gaps found by the fighting patrols. By the fourth day, the Germans were through into open country. The whole of the second French line had crumbled in a matter of hours. For the first time on the Western Front since 1914, they scented a breakthrough. Few trenches faced them, not much barbed wire, open country ahead. And they had taken 10,000 prisoners.
They give one the impression of complete breakdown and complain loudly of their senior commanders.
Even Joffre was shaken out of his accustomed calm.
I wished more than at any time in my life I could be in two places at once. I felt that decisions I was taking at Chantilly, far from the scene of action and based on uncertain information, ran the risk of being invalidated before they could be carried out. I would have liked to be at Verdun, but my duty unquestionably was to be at my headquarters.
The Kaiser was certain that Verdun was about to fall. He came up to watch the kill through a well-protected periscope. Would the front hold? By nightfall on February the 25th, only the forts and a few brave men barred the Germans' way. Fort Douaumont, its tortoise hump dominated the battlefield. The men of the 24th Brandenburg Regiment, just back from their victory over the Serbs in the Balkans, had no orders to capture Douaumont. Their objective lay short of it. But their regimental motto was, "Do more than your duty." And now, just in front of them, lay the fort of Douaumont. It drew them on like a magnet. Unknown to each other, several small groups of Brandenburgers and pioneers entered Douaumont at various points. A handful of men against a fort of concrete and steel. The Germans were astounded to find the fort was garrisoned by 56 elderly territorial gunners under the command of a sergeant major. A handful of men were manning the guns. The rest were sheltering in the cellars from the German bombardment. They offered no resistance. Fort Douaumont, the world's most powerful stronghold, had fallen without a shot being fired. In Germany there was jubilation, and the Crown Prince himself decorated the victors, the brave Brandenburgers. But in France, not surprisingly, the disaster of Douaumont was played right down by French General Headquarters. The crowds of worshippers in Paris on that Sunday morning, February the 27th, were to find their newspapers full of evasions. The official communiqué spoke of a fierce struggle around Fort Douaumont, which is an advanced outpost of the old defenses of Verdun. The position carried by the enemy after several fruitless assaults which cost them very heavy losses has since been reached and passed by our troops. Evasions of this kind made matters worse, and the rumors passed from mouth to mouth that Verdun itself was lost. In Verdun itself, confusion reigned. "Run like hell, but no panic," one French officer was overheard to shout. The Germans were only 5 miles away. There was one more ridge between them and the city. Could Verdun be held? The Castelnau thought it could be, and to carry out his will, he had persuaded Joffre to appoint General Pétain as commander of the Verdun army. Pétain, the peasant from northern France, had begun the war as a colonel due for retirement. Now, 18 months later, he was an army commander. French soldiers had heard the stories told of Pétain. They knew that he cared for his troops. They knew that he was frugal with men's lives. As the desperately needed reinforcements moved up, the word went round, Pétain is in charge. All will be well. Conserve your strength. The counter-offensive will follow, Pétain told his commanders. But only the most precarious of lifelines now connected Verdun to the rest of France. The only rail link left was a narrow-gauge railway built to supply a peacetime garrison. Alongside the railway, there was one second-class road. It ran into Verdun from Bar-le-Duc, 50 miles to the south. The road was only 20 feet wide, just wide enough for 2 vehicles to pass. The trucks that bumped along it on their solid tires had been commandeered from all over France, more than 3,000 of them. It was like some gigantic serpent which never stopped and never ended, said one American observer. By a miracle of organization, the road was kept open. In this critical week at the end of February, 25,000 tons of supplies and 190,000 men passed along it. 6,000 vehicles a day, one every 14 seconds, for hours on end. In the months ahead, 2/3 of the entire French army were to pass up this road, bound for the Calvary of Verdun. A French writer named the road La Voie Sacrée, the sacred way. Now, in the lengthening days of March, the Germans extended their attacks to the west bank of the Meuse, and to a hill with the sinister name of Mort-Homme, dead man. Nearly 250,000 men were now involved in Falkenhayn's adventure. The bloodletting was getting out of hand.
Our blinded, wounded, crawling and shouting soldiers kept falling on top of us and died while splashing us with their blood. It was a living hell.
Verdun is terrible because a man is fighting against material with the sensation of striking out at empty air. Oh, how I envy those who can charge with a bayonet instead of waiting to be buried by a shell.
By the end of March, after 40 days fighting, the Germans had lost about 80,000 men, the French a few thousand more. The casualty gap was narrow. Villages had disappeared. Woods had disappeared. The battlefield was a lunar landscape.
These days of Verdun were foul. Several times they have raised before our eyes the veil of hell. Our mission was to be crushed. Divisions followed each other. They had no other role but to set up each day before the enemy a wall of corpses.
Trenches were mere ditches. For days you never saw the enemy, just endless shells.
You ate beside the dead. You drank beside the dead. You relieved yourself beside the dead. You slept beside the dead.
Often you had no sleep for over a week.
Tomorrow those who sleep in beds will read in their newspapers that the line is held. How can they imagine what that simple word, hell, means?